Don Gabinito. Apart from her hut in the hills, Doña Silvia also had another house situated on sizable grounds by the road on the outskirts of a small town, almost completely concealed by many trees that grew around it. To the left of the house, a luxuriant tree provided excellent shade over several benches, crudely built of logs and planks. At the back, a ramada made of poles supported a climbing vine, which, in season, bloomed lavishly with beautiful flowers. On hot afternoons, we would sit and talk there while shelling corn or doing some other work. While I was ill, my daily tasks consisted of nursing my wounds and, as Doña Silvia put it, cleansing away my sins. She explained that our principal responsibility towards the spirit was to heal ourselves. For us, this is the basic principle and the way that leads one to safety, happiness, and contentment. For that, one must first purify oneself. People are so used to being unwell that they don't even realize they are ill and only look after themselves in extreme cases. We, the healers, however, are different. We are dedicated to constant maintenance of our health because it is a sin to harm the body given us by God. The healing path demands that we stop sinning because no one can enter glory unless their physical body is in perfect working condition. I asked, why is that? Because as long as one's body is using its resources to heal, one hardly has enough energy to do other work. The price one pays for neglecting one's health is very high. Not only does one pay by disease and even death, but one can never manage to gather the energy necessary for salvation. While my wounds were healing, I walked using a cane as a makeshift crutch. I could not help noticing strange activities in the healer's house. At first, I could not distinguish very well the people who frequented it. But after a while, I became able to tell the residents from those who came for consultation or as occasional visitors. Among the patients, the residents, and the frequent visitors, I made friends with a strange old man who told me he was suffering from gastric ulcer because of alcohol abuse and other shit, as he put it. It turned out that the old man, called Don Gabinito, was like a house dog. Everyone treated him badly and seemed to want to chase him out. For some reason, however, I enjoyed his company, although I pitied him. Doña Silvia even told me once not to give him too much rope, because otherwise they'd never manage to get rid of him. I asked, why do you want to get rid of him? Ah, Bino, simply couldn't be more annoying. But as he's homeless, he's moved in with us. He came here ill with malaria, delirious all the time and close to dying. We cured him. But as he had nowhere to go once we'd finished with him, he stayed on and ended up living here with us. Just imagine, one day, pretending to be crazy, he wanted to have his way with me. Fat chance. I whacked him right across his mug. He went off with his noodle ringing and regained his sanity double quick. I can't believe Don Gabinito did that, I said. He seemed so fragile and delicate with everyone and totally submissive. I honestly felt that way. Never be fooled by appearances, and beware, because wolves are sometimes disguised as sheep. Doña Silvia laughed to tears at her own words. I thought she was quoting one of her biblical sayings, or something similar to illustrate the old man's indecent behavior, and that in this case, her quote meant that you always had to be on your guard against evil. Don Gabinito was always busy with something, actively tending to the sick or helping them settle in. As they waited for their turn, he would serve them water or lemonade. He would attend to everyone with courtesy and grace. Yet, as soon as he spoke, no one could have the slightest doubt that he was raving mad. On many occasions, he would even become violent, so we all preferred him to stay quiet. Once he had calmed down, however, Don Gabinito would display such clarity of thought that my esteem for him grew steadily. We mainly discussed science, culture, and religion. The man was an erudite, but for some reason or for no reason whatsoever, all of a sudden he would lose his composure and began babbling incoherently. Don Gabinito kept a tilted board in the open area at the back of the house. One day I asked him what it was for, and he invited me to meet him there later that night. The darkness was so impenetrable that I had to grope around. With arms extended in front of me, I made my way as carefully as possible up to the area of our meeting. When I got there, I could not see anyone. I felt the first pangs of fear. But at that moment, Don Gabinito arrived with a kerosene lamp. As amiable as ever, and pointing a finger at the myriads of brilliant tiny lights in the sky, asked in his lively manner, "Have you looked at the stars carefully?" I had always loved the night sky, so I told him that yes, I had, and that I was enchanted by them. He then explained to me the workings of the device, adjustable both in angle and in direction, with 360-degree mobility. I wanted to know what his tilted bench was for. He invited me to try out his observatory, as he called it, by lying down on it for a moment. I reclined on the wooden board and found the position extremely comfortable. The direction he had selected provided me with a splendid view of a large, milk-white patch sprawling in the sky. That night, we talked until the small hours, and Don Gabinito demonstrated vast knowledge of stellar cartography. I became accustomed to meeting with Don Gabinito at night. He taught me to identify stars I had never heard of before. My visits became so frequent that he built an additional observatory for me, and the two of us passed many a night hour discussing stars and life. As I gazed entranced at the splendor of the night sky, Don Gabinito helped me distinguish the constellations, the groupings of stars forming the zodiac, which he knew by their popular names, their scientific names, and their names in the language of the ancients. We spent hours every night identifying the stars. With his help, I learned to isolate unusual groups of stars, which, according to him, resembled one a death ray, another a vulture in flight, and so on. He would give names as exotic as possible to each group he wanted me to learn. In this manner, he gave me a masterly introduction to the knowledge of the ancients, explaining the characteristics of the stars in the form of anecdotes and tales of mythical personages, drawing on literature or indigenous tradition, or maybe inventing them himself. One night, while discussing the constellation of Sagittarius, I asked Don Gabinito if he believed in horoscopes. "Those in the magazines?" he replied, with a horrified face. "Are you kidding? I'm crazy, but I'm not a dickhead." "And yet the healers over there believe in them," he added, pointing at the house. "They believe in horoscopes in the magazines? That lot believe in any drivel they're told, he replied, suppressing a chuckle, and then added, correcting himself, "All right, they don't read the magazines, but they do believe that stars affect people. That knowledge comes from their ancestors." "Do you know what that knowledge is about?" I asked. "Only what I've heard them discuss." He added that doubtlessly certain stars did exert some kind of influence on our planet. For example, the moon affects all living beings, including humans. The authorities everywhere know that more crimes and accidents take place at the time of the full moon. The tendency of pregnant women to give birth during the waxing phases of the moon is also considered a mystery. According to Don Gabinito's teaching, understanding our relationship with the universe and how the cosmic influences affect us was vital for achieving harmony with our environment and our peers. There is a law of attraction and repulsion in the cosmos. Energy flows from one side to the other, following regular patterns, and it is very important to understand how that swaying of energy affects us. I asked him, How could I set about becoming aware of how it affected me? And he told me that healers advised their apprentices to make a corroboration list. I did not understand what he meant, so he gave me an example. You should keep record of your emotional states and then compare it against the phases of the moon. The list could also include notes of your energy level, physical disposition, mental clarity, periods of greater irritability, and so on. Every night, after everyone else had retired, I enjoyed getting together with Don Gabinito to gaze at the sky and talk. Sometimes I felt sure he would not come because he had reached the peak of madness in the course of the day. But then he'd turn up as if nothing had happened. When I was with him, time passed so fast that sometimes I only became aware that the night was over as the day began to break. With the intention of helping him, I tried to question him on a number of occasions about his radical changes of character. He began calmly, trying to explain, but then lost control. So I decided not to bother him anymore with it. However, piecing the fragments of what he told me together with what I heard from the others, I managed to form an idea of what seemed to have happened to him. He told stories of beings from other planets and talked as if he had been abducted by aliens. What hurt me most was that no one believed him and even laughed in his face when he told them of his adventures. How do you think I got malaria, huh? Huh? He asked me in his typical whiny, urgent manner. Well, it was those damn rascals. They took me and then left me in the middle of the Amazon jungle. I had to traipse through it for months, eating roots and forest fruits, and facing all kinds of danger, of which I managed to survive all but the mosquitoes. Oh, those friggin' mosquitoes. They were something else. When I finally encountered the first signs of civilization, I was already very sick. And I can guarantee you, I was very far away from Mexico then. I had to walk far to get back there. I used to be fine in the head until those wretches did something to me. It took me years to remember who I was, and I still come off the rails from time to time, said Don Gabinito, referring to his constant attacks of madness. Then he became agitated again and spoke incongruously with the expression of a frightened psychopath. The stories of his abduction were famous among the residents and the visitors who openly made fun of his yarns. Then he would end up becoming raving mad and start drooling on his shirt, speaking incoherently, and even attacking people. On one occasion, a dog spirit entered him. He bit one of the assistants, then went back to the house and barked wildly for hours. One night of the new moon, I had the shock of my life. I was just about to go to bed when I heard Don Gabinito howl somewhere not far away, and filled with curiosity, went to see what he was up to. I could see his silhouette in the distance by starlight alone. When I got closer, however, I saw it was the outline of a huge wolf. I spun around and leaped as I had never done before in my entire life, feeling stabs of vestigial pain in my healing wounds. Vestigial. I ran like crazy and reached the door of the house in seconds, my heart pounding. Concerned, Doña Silvia asked me what had happened. I did not want to admit that I had been spying on Don Gabino and said, I've been running, that's all. She laughed and said I was white as wax, as if I'd seen a ghost, or worse. Still laughing, she added that she'd seen me prowling around Bino. I admitted her scene had been accurate and described the weird thing I had perceived. She said I'd bumped into the Nawal. I thought again that she had used the word Nawal erroneously. I longed to corroborate the description of Nawalism Castaneda had given in his books more than anything. So I closed myself to any other description, rejecting anything that did not fit its specifications. Fanaticism is a disease of the mind where the patient strives to carry on in the same direction. Self-importance, and even more, the shame of admitting one's mistakes, often compel one to act like an automaton that only sees what it is programmed to see. One of the noblest concepts of modern science shares with Nahualism is that both are able to admit to their mistakes and learn from them, the excitement of discovering the truth being as great as discovering its opposite. There is a whole collection of anecdotes about incidents involving Don Gabinito. On one occasion, for example, a very unfriendly white nanny goat got away. Don Gabinito went to his den and pulled out a billy goat hide, complete with a stuffed head fashioned with a beautiful pair of horns and glass eyes that gave it a macabre appearance. He put on his billy goat disguise and charged into the bushes, bellowing. Unsurprisingly, in a little while, he returned with the goat meekly following him without the aid of a rope. Don Gabinito was out once with one of the patients looking for herbs in the nearby hills. It so happened that during the excursion, the girl got bitten by a rattlesnake. The crazy old man took care of her for several days among the hills, until he had cured her not only of the snake bite, but also of the disease she had originally been suffering from. I learned later that the snake bite was the very medicine the patient needed for her condition. In fact, that was the reason Don Gabinito took her to the hills. He told us that he had already spoken to the snake and asked it to help him. The snake had agreed, and so he took the sick girl there. He told us he had said to the snake, "Lady Coatl, please help me cure a sick girl who needs a drop of your venom. But it must be a very small amount, because if you inject too much, she will die." The snake replied, "Don't worry, old man. I know what I'm doing." And so at the right moment, the snake injected enough of its venom to cure, but not kill, the girl. Speaking of the healers, Don Gabinito said jokingly, with a look of exaggerated disapproval, "And do our dear friends here recognize my achievement? No, sir, they don't. They say everything was pure coincidence, and that the girl was cured by potions they gave her. I can heal no worse than they, but no one takes me seriously." On another occasion, as part of our training, we were all going to climb a very steep mountain. In his piping tone, Don Gabinito managed to convince one of our companions that he badly wanted to go with us, but was very ill and could not walk. Would he be kind enough to carry him? The young man agreed, and Don Gabinito clambered onto his back. The poor boy carried him all the way up, stumbling, puffing, and sweating like a pig on a spit. When we finally got to the top, Don Gabinito jumped off the youth's back with the agility of an acrobat and vanished among the rocks and the shrubbery. We searched for him for a while, but it was beginning to get dark, and we needed to put up an emergency shelter right there on the hilltop. It was a crazy night. We were harassed by the Allies. All of us heard the flapping of wings and the screeching of what seemed to be a huge bird over our heads, but could see nothing. Then we were attacked by a horde of invisible monkeys that made us forget our fear of the flying creature. We were so scared that we ran out of there in full darkness and only stopped when we had reached the plains below. One is what one eats. One day I accompanied Doña Silvia to town, to the market where some friends had a stall with medicinal herbs. While she chatted with people there, I took the opportunity of buying a soft drink and cookies. I was about to start eating them when Doña Silvia noticed and immediately came over, chiding in an angry tone, "You motherfucking bastard!" I looked at her in amazement, not understanding the reason for her anger. I noticed that the people around me were laughing. Pointing at my food, she went on, "You're poisoning yourself. You are still in the recovery stage and you are not allowed to eat that shit. She urged me to throw it all into the dustbin. A minute later, we were walking from the market to the square in front of the church. I was still stunned from her rebuke, but she spoke to me kindly, introducing me to what she called a healthy way of eating. Healers can eat anything, Doña Silvia said, answering one of my questions, but they avoid processed food whenever they can. How much energy can there be in food processed by machines and never touched by human hands? Today, people are guided by what they see on telly. They feed on crap, which is why they are always unwell. If, after a food advert, they have to advise you to eat fruit and vegetables, it means that the advertised food is harmful. It is the same type of advert as the ones where they are obliged by law to state that their product may cause cancer or contains a chemical of some kind. For us, food has to be fresh and freshly cut, either beef or chicken butchered on the day, or freshly picked fruit, not that frozen junk or animal carcasses dead for who knows how long. Her face showed a strange smile that made me shudder. With shining eyes and lowering her voice, she added, "If they can, the witches drink the blood of sacrificed animals. They try to take the best possible advantage of the gift of the life that has been extinguished." I felt a slight twitch in the pit of my stomach as I imagined myself having to drink animal blood. But Doña Silvia's stern voice brought me back. And you don't need to stuff your belly like a desperate son of a whore who only lives to eat. There are assholes who transfer all their frustrations, fears, and other emotional states to food, then remain fixated on the food. And, even when they're not hungry, still keep gobbling and gobbling it down, like pigs with nothing else to do. You need to give your guts a break from time to time. Occasionally, you have to spend a few days on water alone, without any food. Now, for a more thorough cleansing of the stomach, one occasionally needs emetics and enemas. After such cleansing, one must be careful and start eating not for the taste, not because one is hungry, but to feed on the energy of the things you eat. She discreetly pointed out a group of people milling before a stand with barbecued pork. Did you see the amount of fat that people ingest with their food? I had to agree, with some guilt, that in effect, the people were accustomed to eating whatever was before them. She imperceptibly pointed at a man and said, "Look, he looks like a pig that gobbles up everything it is thrown." She was referring to a fat gentleman walking on the other side of the park, right in front of us. A fat lady came by from the opposite direction, carrying a paper bag full of bread loaves under her arm. The man greeted her as she walked by with difficulty, her enormous buttocks wobbling. Shaking her head and clicking her tongue in disapproval, Doña Silvia murmured, "I can't look at her anymore." And then she doesn't understand why she's so fat and has such high blood pressure. People abuse bread and pastry to the point where they get ill, and then come crying to us to cure them. I asked, "But we eat tortillas. Isn't that the same thing?" "No," she replied categorically. "Our tortillas are made with corn ground, there and then, by the hands that prepare them. So they preserve their energy level very well. The same applies to all the other food we eat. All of it is chosen and selected to produce maximum yield and vigor." She explained that food fell into the categories of cold, hot, or neutral, and that those were, in their turn, classified according to their energy levels. Once she had explained the difference between one food and another, she took me to various food stalls in the area and, to test my understanding, ordered me to classify the food they served according to the energy scheme she had explained. I could see that, with rare exception, there was little quality in the food the people ate there. From then on, I started paying more attention to what I ate. So much so that my body learned to demand exactly what it needed, when it needed it, and in the necessary quantity. I also learned from the healers how to maintain a daily exercise regime. Once I felt better, I began joining in their morning exercises. That kind of activity made me feel good for the rest of the day. Exercise keeps one alert and healthy. It makes one capable of making hard decisions. It is particularly important that intellectual people who spend all day sitting down implement a daily keep fit practice, as otherwise, that type of person is doomed to disease and rheumatic pains. The ritual of initiation. In the healer's house, time passed almost unnoticeably, as treating my wounds and performing purification tasks. I received a huge amount of information about medicinal herbs and healing techniques, which at first I took for part of my healing treatment. Before long, however, I realized that there was more to it than met the eye. For Doña Silvia, purification meant freeing ourselves from the horrendous emotional load we carry. Only through deliberate acts, such as recapitulation techniques, cleansing, and strengthening of the body, can such purification help free an individual of that load. The religious atmosphere and the stories we listened to every night helped create a separate, almost fantasy world within me. Little by little, this world took possession of my mind. I had always had an overdeveloped imagination, so in no time at all I found myself sharing alien concepts that not so long ago would have been utterly unacceptable to me. Understanding the customs and the mentality of the healers could prove to be more complex than one might have expected. In daily life, people identify with them for their charity and religious piety. Pity? But at night, their hidden face comes into view with their nasty, almost heretical stories, in which they play roles of traditional mythical characters and ancient gods. Their tales are populated by angels, demons, and infernal beasts, which according to them roam the forests and the mountains. I believe I was immune to those silly little tales of terror, until I found myself reacting apprehensively to certain things that had no business existing. The healers had managed to sow seeds of doubt in my heart. In the beginning, when I first got there, my retiring ways separated me from the others, which gave the healers the perfect opportunity to frighten me and set me up with all manner of practical jokes. One of the sickest pranks was when I found a pair of discarded old sandals by a pile of rubbish. They appeared to have no owner, so I grabbed them, thinking of mending and using them myself, because the shoes I wore were not very comfortable. I took them to the small room I had been allocated at one side of the house, left them in a corner, and went to bed to rest, planning to work on them on another occasion. I was half asleep when I heard a noise. At first, I believed I was dreaming, but the noise became stronger. Worried it might be a rat or some other animal, I woke up just in time to experience the greatest scare of my life. In semi-darkness, I saw the sandals move by themselves and actually walk out of the room. My whole body broke out in goose flesh. I believe I fainted from fright, because the next thing I remember was Doña Silvia tending to me with a wet cloth and water in a wash basin. I told her what had happened. She laughed and jokingly said I'd probably seen a ghost, but I rejected that explanation, preferring to believe I had had a hallucination, which, because of my weakness, made me lose conscience. I could, however, see that the sandals had really disappeared. Another story worth mentioning happened during a period of extraordinary drought. Even the well from which we drew water had dried up. which forced us to walk a distance of 2 miles in order to fetch water. I remember ruminating at the time on the contradiction of being able to travel through the universe with one's dreaming body while being at the mercy of the basic laws of everyday life a moment later. It so happened that on one occasion, as I went along lugging my pails full of water, the Nawal blocked my way. It appeared to me in the form of a disgusting beast that seemed to have 2 ears on each side of the head and an enormous pair of horns. Its eyes were like those of a fine bull, with a snout full of crooked pointed teeth. Its growl was so loud and inhuman that I dropped the pails and ran away from there like a shot. I ran so hard that I must have fainted, since to this day I cannot remember how I got to the house. When I regained conscience, 2 of the grandparents were tending to me. The healer's crowning strategy was that when the time came for me to be accepted as an assistant, they prepared for me a ceremony of initiation containing a variety of demonic elements. I said I did not take it seriously, but even then the truth was that, within myself, I was trembling with fear. The ceremony took place after I had recovered from my wounds and accepted my role among them. It is a good example of the magisterial way in which the healers took advantage of my fear. One day, Doña Silvia announced that at the next full moon, an initiation ceremony for me would be held. I accepted her invitation enthusiastically because I considered it to be a real honor. She warned me, however, that those who took part in those ceremonies became changed forever and would never be the same again. I remember paying little attention to her comments, being more worried about the ceremony itself. I was concerned about the procedures, but the healers would give me no details or explanations of what was going to happen. On the night of the ceremony, we got out of the house together and walked a long way in the darkness until we got to a place where a group of people was gathered around a bonfire. As we approached them, Doña Silvia indicated that I should sit down on a rock in the form of a chair that was at one end of the group, next to the fire. I noticed then that thick clouds had hidden the full moon that only a short while ago helped us by illuminating our way to the meeting place. Without the moon, the scene seemed even more somber. The nearby waterfall made a thunderous noise. I could recognize the song of various night birds. They gave the finishing touch to the scene, which looked like something out of a thriller. By firelight, the participants looked like a circle of specters that had emerged from another time. I could see some of the healer's assistants among them and was surprised to spot some of the patients and even neighbors I had seen in Doña Silvia's house. The group consisted of both young and old people. We were little more than a dozen. I noticed that the others were regarding me with curiosity. I felt troubled and a bit out of place and hated being in a position where I was attracting attention. I had never taken part in a ceremony of this type before, and consequently did not know how to proceed, which filled me with anxiety and anticipation. The participants began chanting in a very low voice. I could not make out what they were saying, but the melody had a hypnotic rhythm that made me feel a kind of longing for something I could not define. After what seemed to me a very long wait, the deep silence was broken by the peculiar sound of conches and drums. The rhythm soon became frenzied, and then, seemingly appearing out of nothing, a man covered with the skin of a wolf or a coyote sprung out of the darkness. He spun around dancing in a strange manner, performed a number of capers, and then approached the fire. From his behavior and performance, I understood that he was a sorcerer. A moment later, the masked man came up to me. Without a single word, he extended his hand as if to greet me. I began raising my right hand in answer to his greeting, but he grabbed my left hand and with tremendous speed made a deep cut between my fingers. The cut bled profusely. I was filled with fear and anger and would have fled that place of madness if I had not been paralyzed by profound terror. At that point, I had become somewhat numb and was feeling that my vision was darkening. I thought I was going to lose conscience, but I recovered straight away. Then the sorcerer came towards me and, in a strangely hoarse, deep voice that seemed to hail from beyond the grave, ordered me to get up and to take off all my clothes, adding that I should keep my eyes closed. His words had a huge force and an authority I could not disobey. The unfamiliarity of the situation prevented me from feeling embarrassed by standing there naked before all those people. At a certain moment, I felt that the sorcerer was blowing softly over my skin. I also sensed that he was cleansing me with aromatic herbs, while praying or murmuring something unintelligible. He cleansed me with smoke and with fire in the same way. I could see a torch move up and down, repeatedly rubbing my skin. Then, at a certain moment, I felt a warm and sticky liquid pour down on my head, oozing all over my body and producing a pleasant sensation of being wrapped in a protective cloak. When the sorcerer finally said I could open my eyes, I did and felt my gorge rise. I was red all over, covered in blood, and on top of a rock there lay the lifeless body of an animal. I wanted to protest, but the solemnity of the occasion prevented me. Next, I was taken to the waterfall, where I was given a ritual bath resembling baptism with water. The water was cold but felt very pleasant to my body, which was burning with heat. After washing off the blood that had dyed me red, drying and dressing myself, I returned to the circle and took my place by the fire. I had hardly sat down when the participants started passing around baskets full of peyote buttons. I knew of peyote from literature, mainly from Carlos's books, but even though I felt great curiosity, it had never occurred to me to try it. I was fearful and prejudiced, but also very curious. When the basket got round to me, still wrapped up in my thoughts, I took a button and placed it in front of me. I considered the possibility of refusing, but at the same time wanted the experience. Without giving much thought to my fears and mistrust, I grabbed the button and started chewing. Its awfully bitter and pungent taste made it difficult to swallow. My stomach was the worst affected. It felt like an independent entity protesting violently. Each of us took a button and chewed it in silence. We sat there together for a long time, eating the buttons. As the hours went by, some participants got up to vomit or dispersed towards the far ends of the area, while others remained seated with their eyes closed, humming in a low voice. I experienced the powerful effect of the plant as a river of light flooding my being. In the light there was a man, or a man-like form, motioning with his hand for me to approach. I was not afraid, knowing him to be a vision brought about by the peyote button. My curiosity was so great that I came closer. What I saw was an extraordinary being, green of color and resembling a marshmallow. Its eyes were striking. I felt that this strange being was a friend whom I could trust. It spoke into my ear, told me its name, and talked about my life. It told me I had to learn to forgive in order to be free, and then sang a song to me, a song that is with me even today. I saw the being depart, perceiving it as a greenish light disappearing amidst the vegetation until it completely vanished. Very slowly, I regained awareness of my surroundings. At a certain moment, as it dawned, the sorcerer came up to me and took off his mask. The state of awareness I was in helped me to lessen my fright. The sorcerer was the very phantom I had seen in the crypt years ago. I was confused more than ever. I was afraid, but still felt I knew him well and remembered him from my dreaming. The sorcerer introduced himself, saying his name was Melchor Ramos. He knew I had been accepted by the Hikuri. He said, and he welcomed me into the present company. Then he started giving me instructions. He said that I should gaze at the fire until the devil appeared to me. Some of the participants had made a spiral with the embers from the bonfire. With some apprehension, I did as he had suggested. I felt like in a dream as I gazed at the embers. Or perhaps I did fall asleep or lose consciousness, because the next thing I knew was that I was hurtling down a black hole. All of a sudden, I found myself inside a monumental cavern that seemed to be kilometers high, with enormous stalactites and stalagmites that looked like monuments representing beings from another world. The walls exuded a fluorescent, greenish, ghostly sheen. The roof was exquisitely beautiful. Its dome appeared to be teeming with stars, so many and so high that I was sure it could only be a dream or a vision. While I gazed in ecstasy at that place, which in the semi-darkness looked like a vision of another world, I believed myself to be alone. Slowly, however, I noticed other persons there with me. Suddenly I recognized Doña Silvia and her companions, seemingly appearing out of nothingness. I felt that if I were to focus on them, they would materialize. As I regarded them, a voice that seemed to be Don Melchor's said that we were sharing dreaming and that this was my real initiation test. I managed to steady my attention and saw Don Melchor as he spoke to me. He said that he had been entrusted with guiding me through the mysteries of the healers, and that today, as a gift of welcome into their company, he was going to teach me a trick for entering dreaming. He said that all one needed in order to enter dreaming was a profound desire to do so. As he spoke, Don Melchor moved his eyes in a strange way, as if to help me grasp something one could not express in words. He went on to say that the technique consisted of concentration and silencing the mind, and that in order to help me, he would give me a gift of power. He reached up into the air with his hand, like a stage magician, and took out of nowhere a beautiful white feather, reflecting the greenish light of the place. You are dreaming right now, because the energy of the Hikuri has helped you get here this first time round. But to accompany us on the other occasions, you'll have to reach us on your own. This feather will help you, he said, handing me the glittering feather. My joy knew no limits that memorable night. What I had believed was a common group of unsophisticated healers was in fact a group of teachers of dreaming. I learned many things on that occasion. Each one of the healers spoke to me in turn, giving me advice and teaching me maneuvers for entering and getting out of the other world. Even today, I do not remember the transition. When I woke up, the sun was already high on the horizon. I was holding a white feather in my hand. After the ritual, I had several opportunities to talk to Don Melchor, but always only briefly. At the time, I was still under the impression that they were a religious order whose job was healing people, It was their job only in a manner of speaking, however, because they did not receive any money for the consultations. Their subsistence was very humble, yet they lacked nothing. They worked in the fields. That and the gifts they received were enough for them to have a good life. It was hard for me to speak to Don Melcher. He inspired in me a kind of fear or respect that discouraged long conversations. Things were direct with him. Everything was pure action, and matters were resolved, badly if need be. There were no half tones with him. Even if you could not swim, he would throw you in the water, so to speak. We always went around Don Melcher very carefully. He frequently repeated these words: "We are all going to die, and there is no other way. It's only a question of time. So you are already dead. What more is there for you to lose? If we look at things that way, the world is our oyster." In his lessons, he said, "Life is a fleeting event in the eternal flow of energy. Death is what gives it meaning." Modern man's confusion comes from thinking that organic life and awareness are one and the same, but that is a mistake caused by lack of experience of dreaming. The healer's teaching hinges on the point that to all intents and purposes, we are already dead. Merely knowing that fact helps us live strong lives and make irreversible decisions. One day, Don Melcher said to me, "Death is real. It is a process of initiation. You must always bear in mind that you are already dead. You died the day when you were attacked there on the hill. Now you must live a new life." There are only two types of people: those who consider themselves immortal and those who know that they are going to die. Do not get distracted. Dare to look at your imminent end. The awakening is now or never. Not wanting to disturb him at the inappropriate moment, I waited long for an opportunity to approach Don Melcher with my questions. One morning I found him in the granary arranging some wooden boxes. I went over to him and asked him if he would be so kind to answer a few questions. He replied, "I've already told you more than once that you can ask me about anything you like. It isn't necessary to go through so many formalities." At the time, my questions were about the ritual I had been through, but nobody seemed keen to discuss the subject. In addition, I was consumed by the desire to establish whether Don Melcher had been the phantom in the cathedral. Another one of my priorities was to find out about the symbolism of the ritual and the pact with the devil. My intention was to ask about the phantom, instead of which I pleaded, "Don Melcher, please tell me something about the ritual of initiation in which I took part." He smiled. "We'll talk about it right now," he said, and set aside the tools he had been working with. We sat down on some empty tomato boxes. "I believe the game has gone on long enough. It is important that there is no misunderstanding in this matter. The ritual we participated in was prepared specially for you." Having said that, he gave me an inquisitive look. What he said was no news to me, because I had already been informed that the ritual was to represent my admission to the healer's world. "That ritual was unique," he continued. "It was designed just for you." "I don't understand. Everyone has a ritual initiation, don't they?" "No," he replied. "That was the only time that we'd done something like that." "But why for me?" I asked, frantically. "I thought you were devil worshippers of some sort, masquerading as Christians." Don Melcher laughed a great deal and said they put on that particular show to help me break loose of my moorings, and that they'd based it on my morbid and ritualistic personality. "You'll see," he said. "Your initiation ritual had much more depth to it than you can remember at this moment. That night, we used your fear to propel you into dreaming, and it worked. In the ritual, I told you to find Zolostak. I was sure you wouldn't even know the meaning of that word, but that you'd intuit it. The important thing was the shock it gave to your body, and that went very well. We achieved our goal. What do you mean by that? I asked. We were looking to put you in the state of total awareness, and there is nothing better than fear to achieve this. Once the ritual acts and the power plants had opened you up, you were ready to enter into the other world. But you needed one final push. That was when I told you to look at the fire. Remember? I was able to recall the scene vaguely, as if it had been part of a dream. That kind of rite serves to open the apprentice. The use of power plants, more than fear and the anticipation caused by the ceremony, produces the movement of the assemblage point. It takes one to the magic world directly, without the need for preliminary steps. The events that had taken place during the ritual remained hidden from my daily awareness for years, and it took me a long time to remember them. In the world of daily affairs, I went on with my usual chores, believing that in my initiation I had seen the devil and was given a feather by helpful spirits for my protection. I even went as far as to believe that the feathers had aided me in a life or death battle against the demons that hung on by my side, trying to prevent me from becoming a healer. With time, I understood that the demons I thought I had seen were my own demons, a vision brought about by the lamentable state of being I was in. Some time later, while walking with Don Melcher towards the hills, I noticed that he was wearing the same old sandals I had previously found. I knew they were the same ones because of a small metal staple fastening a torn piece of leather on the right sandal. Becoming healer's assistant. At first, even after having received a great amount of instruction in the healer's art, I still did not consider myself one. I despaired of my awkwardness and my failures to understand and apply the knowledge that I had received. I felt inept, and that troubled me, because whenever it was my turn to attend to someone, a strange pressure which I could only describe as apprehension, nervousness, or even anguish took hold of me. Noticing my frustration, Doña Silvia advised, "Never become obsessed with anything. Enjoy whatever you're doing. If at any time you feel that it is turning into hard work, put it aside for a while and do something else. You'll see that the moment to continue with whatever you were doing before will come of its own accord." When I told her about my nervousness, she said that I had to let myself go with that feeling. Letting oneself go was in any case the technique of contacting the spirit that guides the healers. Personally, I described it as yielding to the pressure, not putting up resistance. It is a matter of becoming part of the spirit that guides all healers. It means aligning with the emanations sorcerers share. On one occasion, while walking in the nearby hills, collecting medicinal herbs, I was struck by lightning. More incredibly than it seems, apart from the fright, absolutely nothing happened to me. Doña Silvia, who was observing me from a distance, remained on the spot for a moment. Seeing that I was well, she smiled with delight and commented, "Now you have the authority to cure. You'll see that from now on, you'll feel differently about healing." She was absolutely right. Since that time, whenever I've attended to a patient, I could feel his affliction within me, if one can put it that way. From the very start of my stay among them, I noticed the healers liked riddles and amused themselves by challenging each other to solve them. On one occasion, one of the assistants proposed a riddle. What is it that goes on walking after the death of a person? It is the shoe, Doña Silvia replied, then challenged us with one. What is it that has legs but doesn't walk, yet moves around? The riddles came in conjunction with healing instruction or other information related to the topic. On that occasion, Doña Silvia taught us about the illness called elephantiasis and how it could be successfully treated by means of particular herbal infusions, baths, and therapeutic massages with oily ointments. To finish, she told us, the leg must be bandaged with herbal paste. The real problem with that illness is blood circulation. To get better, the patient must take a lot of tea and drink a lot of water. At the end of the meeting, as nobody had come up with the correct answer to her riddle, she said, smiling, "It is the chair, fools. It has 4 legs, but it does not walk, and it definitely moves whenever you use it." In the course of another conversation, I asked her about the purpose of the riddles, and she replied, "Everything in life is a riddle. In fact, the whole universe is a riddle to be solved." She added that the ancients used to deal with the world through riddles. Did you know that there is a personal riddle for every healer? That you have your own riddle, and that there is also one for the group, and even for our lineage? I did not know anything of the sort. My curiosity was instantly aroused. What I believed to be an inconsequential game was turning out to be an infinitely more complex affair. I wanted to hear about my own personal puzzle, but Doña Silvia said it was something I would have to find out for myself. I asked her then about the puzzle that referred to us as a group, and she offered. The turkey turns over the soil, searching for food. The peasant injures the soil and places the seed in the wound. How many times must the soil be turned? How many seeds make a cornfield? I had no idea of the meaning of those words, so I asked Doña Silvia for an explanation. Laughingly, she said it was a riddle, the meaning of which I should discover myself. She remained silent for a few moments and then wondered if I was at all interested in the riddle pertaining to our lineage of healers, seers. Of course I am interested, I replied, suddenly conscious of my sluggishness. Doña Silvia spoke the lines. The ulama pierces the divine circle. I set my eyes on the temple wall. I gaze at the beautiful, dazzling flower that opens in the morning. I light the fire to prepare my food. I told Doña Silvia that this riddle made even less sense than the previous one. She laughed and said that my reaction was understandable, as it was indeed a difficult riddle, and that the translation did not help at all.